Hi guys. So these stories are really for the adult or an older kid. They are stories about Yule, but in told in a different way. They're not the similar story time kind of children's books that I normally read on here. They are all about the Winter Solstice. And so I thought I would start my series with the first two stories that I just adore from this series. I'll be reading from the book, The Return of the Light, 12 Tales from Around the World for Winter Solstice. And since there's no pictures, I figured we could focus on the tree and the scenery in the background. If you have a candle, you can light a candle and kind of stare at that and really listen to these incredible stories about the coming of the year and the turning of the year and the return of the sun. So here we go. The first story is called Why Hummingbird Has a Red Throat. And this is from the Alomentco, Miwok, the North California coast. At the beginning, when the first people lived on the top of a great canopy of the sky had 4 holes in it, one in the east, another in the south, one in the west, and another in the north. The sky holes opened and closed rapidly all the time. The first people used their magic to come down through the holes and to change themselves into all the creatures, plants, and things of the world. So when earth people were created, they had oak trees and flat stones on which to grind their acorns. They had reeds for houses and baskets. They learned from the sun how to shoot arrows like rays. They learned to live together like minnows swim and mice nest. But Chaka, the marsh wren, was an orphan boy. No one liked him. The people gave Chaka food. Sometimes the people even gave him a crayfish to eat. But they always made Chaka feel like an outsider. So Chaka stayed under the cover of bulrush and sedgegrass, only appearing at dawn and dusk to again ask for more. Chaka grew more ashamed, and the people grew stingier. "Get your own food, Chaka," they said. "We work hard. Why don't you? It's not our job to feed you, even if you are just a kid." Marsh Wren's eyes filled with tears of anger. The white stripes over his eyebrows quivered. "If you don't feed me," he yelled, "I will shoot out the sun." Everyone laughed. "Yeah, right, Chaka. Go right ahead." "I will," rattled Marsh Wren. "Do it," said the people, clearly not believing him. They turned away. Marsh Wren did shoot out the sun with an arrow as sharp as his beak. As though it had been a bladder filled with light, the sun popped and all the light disappeared. The whole world became dark. No sun, no moon, no stars, no fire. Everything was dark. The dark seemed to last for years. No one could find food because no one could see. Everyone was starving. All this time, Oyi, the coyote man, was thinking about how he could get the sun and the light back again. At length, he saw something way up in the eastern sky through the hole that opened and closed as fast as woodpecker wrapped on a dead tree trunk. "I think I see light," said Oyi to himself. He squinted his eyes. Now there was no doubt. "Yes," he exulted. But a moment later, Oyi's tail drooped. "Now how am I going to go all the way up there to get that light, he asked himself. Glumly, Oyi began to pick his way through a tangle of old blackberry vines that led him to his tiny stash of acorn mush. Ouch! Ooh, ouch! He yelped as the thorns scratched at his nose and his soft foot pads. Oyi remembered the good old days when this path had been blanketed with wet, curling ferns. The sun's beautiful light had slanted through the limbs of the gnarled live oaks, now too hidden by the dark. Oh, rots, muttered Oyi. Rots and sots. Rots yourself, answered a high-pitched voice, followed by a vreep. Huh? What? Who's there? Said Coyote Man. He heard another vreep sound and said, Oh, hey, Hummingbird. How's it going, Kulupi? Coyote Man was glad to have someone to talk to. Vreep! Same old thing, Coyote Man. Same old thing. You know that, said Hummingbird. If we just had some light. Yeah, Oyi agreed automatically. Then, near his eyes, he felt the tiny wind stirred by Kulupi's wings. Suddenly, he could picture his cinnamon, purple, and green-colored little friend, wings vibrating like twin halos. He remembered Kulupi darting through the air faster than a fish flits through shallow water. Hey, Hummingbird, I've got this great idea. Vrip! Kulupi, sputtered Oyi. Guess what I just saw, just now? Light, Kulupi. I saw light. I saw light way up high in the sky, way too high for me to get, but you, Hummingbird, you could get it in a second. You saw light, Coyote Man? The little voice was incredulous. Where? Up high, Hummingbird. Really? Go look. I know you can bring it back for us. The tiny wind of Kulupi's wings stopped for a moment. Oyi could imagine his friend hesitating. Then he heard a reassuring vreep, and he knew Hummingbird was splitting the black air in a steep climb to the top of the sky. It would be crazy not to try, shouted Kulupi, but he was already too far away for Coyote Man to hear. Up, up, up rushed Kulupi until he, too, could see the dab of light blinking inside the mouth of the hole in the eastern sky. Nearer and nearer he sped until, heart beating wildly with his own daring, he shot through the hole and tore off a piece of the blazing orange light on the other side. Vreep, I got it, yelled Kulupi. He tucked the fire under his chin and hung for a moment in the air. Luxuriating in the heat. But suddenly the sound of giant wings flapping filled the space around him. In a burst of fear, without even looking to see what or who might be following him, he raced back towards the hole in the sky. Through it he flung the fire, then he swooped after it. All around him, the air turned pink and blue. The fire he'd carried swelled round as a puffball and sent arrows of light down to the earth below. People gathered on the shores of the bay, cheering, and Coyote Man whooped and howled. Even Chaka, the marsh wren, muttered with pleasure. Cut-cut-tur, he said. Kulupi, now glitteringly graceful in the light of a new sun, sped towards his nest. His feathers shone, as they had in the old days, metallic bronze green, jewel-like purple, and rich golden cinnamon. But then, when Kulupi modestly lifted his head to acknowledge the happiness of everyone below, the feathers on his throat, against which he had carried the light, were tinged a new brilliant scarlet, the color of sunfire. And so Hummingbird is marked to this very day. Beautiful. So I'm going to read one more like that tonight, and then we will do a couple more tomorrow. So the second one is called Raven Steals the Light. And this is from the Inuit of North America. And I just want to fix this just a little before we start. Because as pretty as it is, it keeps losing focus, which is okay because you don't really have to look at these. But okay. Raven Steals the Light. In the time before Raven made the stars and before Tupilak stole the moon and the sun, everyone lived on this side of the sky. Tupilak was a magician with a high cone hat and shoes that allowed him to walk miles in a single step. Raven lived in his cozy snow hut at the edge of the village. One harsh winter, when the snow froze the very earth, Tupilak put on his high cone hat and his magic shoes. He walked up to the sky and used his power to cut a hole in it. Then he climbed through and built himself a house on the other side. His wife argued with him. "What are you doing?" she cried. "All of our friends are on this side of the sky. If we live on the other side, we will be completely alone." "You can go back and visit," he assured her. "I don't want to visit. I want to be here, right next to everyone and everything. I don't want to live alone." "What do you mean, live alone?" said Tupilak. "You'll be living with me, and we'll have children, and the whole thing will be much more comfortable. Why, everyone else will want to visit you." "But no one has your magic, Tupilak. They won't be able to come." "Oh, probably some of them do," he said, and persisted in his plan. He carried from the first world all his magical tools. His wife, sighing with resignation, carried a stash of frozen seal meat. After they had settled as best they could, and had even had a beautiful daughter, Tupilak could see that his wife was still sad and dissatisfied. In order to please her, he decided to steal the light. He climbed back through the hole in the sky and walked in his magic shoes straight to the top of the sky. Then into each of 2 strong bags, wrapping the necks of the bags tight with sinew rope, he crammed the moon and the sun. He pushed the bags back through the hole and hooked them high on the ceiling of his house, letting out the light only when he chose to do so. Now the world on this side of the sky had no light at all. Because Raven loved to sleep, he hardly noticed it all at first. Whenever he awoke and saw that it was still dark, he snuggled back into his black feathered coat and slept again. He dreamed of steaming globs of fat, of collecting bright new treasures, and of turning breathtaking somersaults. But the people on this side of the sky were puny and tired with lack of light and food. They didn't even have the strength to wonder anymore where Tupilak and his wife had gone. Finally, the people came to Raven and called weakly at his door. His dreams interrupted, Raven immediately thought of Tupilak. He picked his way through the horde of the shiny things he'd already found and poked out his head. "Raven, the sun never comes out anymore, and there's no moon either." "We're running out of food." Raven heard the despair in their voices. "Tupilak's behind all this," he muttered. Out loud, he promised the people that he would try to find the sun. "And the moon," they said. "The moon, too," he assured them. A pretty puzzle, thought Raven. This is going to be a long journey. So he took as big a bag of food as he could carry, and in another bag several good-sized rocks. Then, increasingly roused at the idea of outwitting Tupilak, Raven pulled down his beak, drew on his black-winged coat, and soared into the freezing night sky. Whenever he needed to rest, Raven dropped a rock from his pack into the endless dark waters below. The rock changed, kerplash, to an island. on which Raven could perch, gobbling down suppers huddled in his warm feather coat until he was ready to fly again. Finally, he came to the hole in the sky made by Tupilak's magic. When Raven stepped through, he found himself dazzled by the sunlight on the other side of the hole, for Tupilak had let the sun out of its bag for the day. The sky was blue. A pool of water glistened, and plants poked green, red, and pink from the brown earth. Raven saw Tupilak in the distance, unmistakable in his high-cone hat, soaking up the yellow heat. Raven coughed. Tupilak squinted. "Is that you, Raven?" he called. "None other," said Raven. "What do you want?" said Tupilak. "The sun and the moon." Tupilak laughed. "Not a chance, Raven. They're mine now." "You are a thief," said Raven calmly. "Takes one to know one," grinned Tupilak, and he stuffed the sun back into its bag. "I'm going to get them back, Tupilak," yelled Raven into the darkness. Tupilak let out the moon and the sun several times, while Raven, munching and dozing, cast about with one idea and then another, trying to form a plan. Then, in the midst of the sunshine, Raven was startled by the appearance of a strong, round, lovely-cheeked maiden making her way down to the pool with a water jug in her hand. Could this be Tupilak's wife? Could she possibly have grown younger in all this light? Ah, no, it must be their daughter. In fact, she carried herself with the confidence of a magician's child. Raven blinked. All at once, he knew his trick. He quickly balled up his black-winged coat, pushed it under a rock, and turned himself into a tiny feather floating on the still pond. Tupilak's daughter sat dreamily at the pool's edge. Raven Feather trembled with expectation. He had a long time to wait, however, because the young woman sang softly to herself, bathed her feet and face in the pool, and then, musing and sighing, combed out her long black hair. But she dipped her jug, and Raven swirled himself inside it. His heart leapt with perfection of the moment when the woman took from its lip a deep quaff before beginning her walk home. Jubilantly, Raven Feather slipped down her throat. His plan was working. Sometime later, Tupilak's daughter gave birth to a huge baby boy, whose mother, grandmother, and grandfather were overjoyed. All the pent-up tenderness of these three, alone for so long on the other side of the sky, they poured into the new little boy, who, unbeknownst to them, was Raven in disguise. His mother nursed him and played with him. His grandmother doted on him. Tupilak adored him. Raven, inside his baby form, was careful to cry and pester for lots of things so that his family would get used to giving him exactly what he wanted. He bided his time, however, before he asked for the bags of light that hung from the ceiling. One day, his mother noticed a bump on the baby's forehead. "Ooh, you've fallen, little one," she crooned, and she nuzzled him and pressed ice to the bump. But Raven knew then that his beak was beginning to bulge, and he didn't have much more time. Very soon after, he cried for the moon bag on the ceiling. "Shh, shh, baby, shh, that's Grandpa's bag," said his mother, and she dangled tasty morsels of food before him. Raven, of course, ate them ravenously. Pleased that her child was eating so well, she bounced him on her knee, calling forth raucous laughter from her round little boy. But soon he again began to wail, waving his chubby little hands upward, pouring out rivers of tears. This time, his grandmother fed him, changed him, and played the bouncing game, but always his sobbing began again, his mouth gasping for air between the heaves of his chest, his little finger pointing at the bag with the moon inside. "Papa's out," said Tupilak's daughter to her mother. "Let's let him have it. What can it hurt? It's tied tightly enough." Tupilak's wife rolled her eyes. It would serve him right anyway if the thing got out. So Raven, hiccuping with joy, was given the moon bag to play with. In seconds, the little boy's face looked round and placid as the moon itself. His mother and grandmother rocked back on their heels, enjoying the sweet silence and the happiness of their little seal pup. The minute their attention wandered, however, Raven unknotted the sinew, sure as if he'd had beak and claws, clapping and screeching as the moon sailed out, bouncing through the smoke hole like a ball of blubber. Tupilak came rushing back to the house when he saw the moon rolling through a tear in the sky. "Who touched my bag?" he bellowed, but stopped short when his wife and daughter pointed to the baby, who had ceased his chortling long enough to emit a shriek of joy upon seeing his grandfather. "Dada!" he called, and reached for Tupilak's old spotted hand. Tupilak's face softened like a long-cooked stew. The baby cooed and patted his grandfather, while Tupilak beamed with pride. The two women looked at each other and shook their heads. Raven wisely waited before he cried for the sunbag to play with. Then, when Tupilak had settled snoring into a nap, he began his earnest howling, waving his hands as if trying to pull down the sunbag. Tupilak woke up. "Oh, give him anything he wants," he groaned. "Just shut him up." The two women shrugged and pulled down the sunbag. They each, with tooth and muscle, wrapped and knotted the sinew twice more. Their closure was so effective that Raven this time could not open the bag. Knowing he must act quickly, he rested regretful eyes for a moment on his mama's back, and then sped, bag in fist, out the door. He raced to his rock and donned the black-winged cape he'd hidden underneath so long before. His beak plunged through his forehead, and Raven took bird form once again. Grasping the sunbag first in his beak and then in his claws, he dove through the hole in the sky and streaked away to the people whose eyes had grown accustomed once again to the light of the moon, but who still lived without the light of the sun. Raven felt hunger pangs as he flew. On he flapped, but his stomach growled for food. By the time Raven spied the people below, fishing in the crooked river by the light of the moon, his wings were trembling with effort. "Gah! Gah!" croaked Raven weakly. "Give me some fish." "Get your own fish, Raven," said the people. "We hardly have enough for ourselves." "Please," begged Raven, "I'll let out the daylight." "You don't have daylight, Raven," said the people, forgetting that they themselves had asked him to bring the sun. Raven cawed with exasperation. He dropped the sunbag and with his remaining strength rammed at it 3 times, pecking its tiny holes out of it, which sizzled particles of the sun tumbling into the sky as sparkling, spinning stars. "He does have something in his bag," exclaimed the people. Then they rushed to ply Raven with fish. Raven gorged and sucked every bone slick. Then, full of power, he tore open the bag. Out exploded the sun, while people screamed and covered their eyes. In a very short time, they were able to bear again his stupendous light, and gratefully prepared for Raven an enormous and delectable feast. On the other side of the sky, Tupilak and his family mourned. Some say they got so lonely they came back to this side of the sky. Others say that if they came at all, it was to steal the light again. But Tupilak has never been able to take the light for long, as he did the first time. Whenever it disappears and returns again, whenever people watch the moon roll into the sky among the bits of sun that are the stars, they think of Raven. And whenever people hear a baby crying, they remember Raven's trick on Tupilak. So pretty good stories. And if you put them in the context of the native people who were telling those stories, then you sort of get the ideas of how this book goes. I really like this book, and we'll be doing some more stories from it this week. The first one was about how the red-crested bird got that red crest, and it's from the sun, tucking the sun underneath his chin. And the second one from the Inuit people up near the North Pole in Alaska, and how they have, sometimes they have months of no sun and then months of only sun. And so they come up with stories of how the sun's return happened. So that will give us an idea of of just how, I'm sure for those people in Alaska, I know some of my subscribers are in Alaska, that the return of the sun, the winter solstice, must mean even more so that you can't wait for the return of that sun. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have many, many blessings.